Today we are going over some words, and the reason for this is words are important, um, and I think the reason that we're getting into a lot of fights and a lot of debates over what really going on with this pandemic is because the media takes scientific words and uses them the way that they kind of understand them, which is okay to some extent, I guess, with casual conversation. But when it comes to a scientist using it, it's used very differently. And when we're both using them to explain two different things, that's where that confusion comes in. And that, I think, is what has created this. Not that there's actually differing information, it's just some people don't know how to use the right words. So I figured we can kind of go over that. It's not a very in-depth view, it's just something I thought about. And I'll probably tune it up later. I don't have any of my software really to do anything fun right now, but I'll work with it. So, important medical terminology and how mainstream media gets this dangerously wrong. Why words are important. So, in science words are coined to be universally, so they're universal and mean the same thing across multiple specialties. So, physics, mathematics, geology, astrophysics, medicine, we all use the same units to some extent. That way we can tie things in together without having to create little, segues to them. We can just plug equations in. In medicine, we try to do that with international standard units, so different countries can do that. But in society, we take these basic definitions of scientific words, scrape the precision, and sand it down to a blanket colloquial. So we hear people talk about science and epidemiology nowadays, saying words like theory and percentages of this, but they're using it very, very wrong. And the reason this is bad is because media science will now seem to contradict when they may actually be trying to say the same thing. So that's what we're not wanting. So one thing I brought up was theory versus hypothesis, and this is it's a hard one because for me, theory in a science standard and in mathematics has always been an explanation, not a question. It's not, well, my theory is, my guess is. No, it's the theorem is, in math, is the explanation of how you get from point A to point B. You solve a mathematical equation, they say, show your work. That's the theorem behind it. Chess, there's theory behind chess. It's not guesses. The chess theory is what moves you're going to make to a certain point. And if you understand the theory up until that point, you really don't have to think, you just do that. But with different areas of academics, theory can mean different things. So if you're talking about philosophy and then you want to start talking about physics in that same thing and you're using words theory, you can't really use those in the same equation, if you will, because they don't mean the same thing. Where theory in a different, maybe a political science, would mean a guess. And hypothesis, when we're talking about science, the difference is theory is a definite answer and hypothesis is a guess which needs research and testing done to develop a theory for. So when they say the theory of gravity, it's not a guess of gravity. It is an equation that explains when we drop something, it falls toward the center of the earth. So here's another thing with terms when we're talking about COVID-19. We only hear COVID-19. We never hear about SARS-CoV-2. And I find that kind of depressing because when the AIDS pandemic came out, we heard about HIV, AIDS. We heard both the terms. And it's very important in this virus too because SARS-CoV-2 is the virus that gives you the disease COVID-19. So COVID-19 is only the serious disease that lands you in the hospital. It causes you to can't breathe, lets people go to the ICU and die. But SARS-CoV-2 doesn't do that. But SARS-CoV-2 is what we test for. It's the nasal swab. So when some people say, I had COVID, but it wasn't bad, it's kind of a lie because they didn't have COVID. COVID is always bad. SARS-CoV-2, not necessarily. It's like saying you had HIV and AIDS, right? HIV causes AIDS, but not everybody with HIV gets AIDS. It's not like, oh, I had HIV, I had AIDS and it wasn't bad. Well, I had AIDS. It was bad. Once you hit AIDS, the definition of AIDS is a CD cell count less than 200, it's bad. And it's an acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So AIDS and COVID are kind of the same thing. So when the media says, oh, Trump had COVID and was out in 3 days. No, he tested positive for SARS-CoV-2, which maybe in his body, it'll bind to the angiotensin receptor, and he doesn't have expressed a lot of those, so maybe he'll be fine. We know this is a very genetic disease on where these land. I mean, SARS is just the common cold. It sounds scary because the first SARS epidemic in the early 2000s was pretty bad, but it's kind of like the seasonal flu. The flu, depending on how dangerous it is influenced on where it affects you in the levels of your lungs. So if it's high up in the lungs where we breathe a lot, then it's easy for us to kill. But if it gets lower down in the lungs where we have less ventilation and more perfusion and air doesn't move as much, it's harder to clear that out. So those are more dangerous areas. And this SARS-CoV-2 virus, uses an angiotensin 2 receptor, which is found in the lungs. It's also found in vasculature, causing clotting problems, causing vascular problems, causing digestive problems. And that's another thing we're worried about. Before I get to vaccinations, there's another thing I want to talk about. Let me see if I can make a slide in here real fast so we can just talk about it. The flu. So the flu, and this kind of gets me. The flu is by definition, a pneumonia, a viral pneumonia. It is not an upset stomach. It is not diarrhea. It's not vomiting. It is a coughing. So when you're saying, "Oh, I'm coming down with the flu," or I got the flu and I was okay. No, you didn't. The flu is still very dangerous, and can kill you. Can kill very healthy people. So when they say this is just like the flu, well, kind of, but no, because a lot of people don't even know if they've had the flu before. But I really just don't like that. So I got to keep putting this. Flu is dangerous. And you guys will got to realize one thing. I don't care about you guys. I don't. If you have opinions on this and you do believe Bill Gates is doing something to do, I don't give a shit. My parents just got vaccinated for COVID-19, and I have so much stress relief because of that. Because I don't want them to die. But I really don't care if you guys die. I'm not doing this to get status. I'm just telling you that I understand this, and if you want to understand it, because a lot of people talk about this and have very strong opinions about it, you don't know jack shit, and that's not your fault because you didn't pay the $400,000 in mind-numbing classes to learn this. So when it comes to the vaccine that's out right now, Pfizer and Moderna are mRNA vaccines, which means they're a recipe for the spike protein. And this recipe will create the spike protein really fast, destroy the recipe, the body will recognize the spike protein, and join an immune system around it. So Pfizer and Moderna both do that. AstraZeneca is a DNA spike protein. So it has one more step. It's got to turn DNA into RNA and then RNA into protein. And then we have Johnson & Johnson, which is we inject a shelled virus. And then Johnson & Johnson introduces, this is kind of like an older step. The first three are like very novel. Introduces a coronavirus for common cold. And attaches a COVID, I don't say COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, sorry. This laptop says so. I'll say SARS-2 spike on it. So we just basically put out we just inject a viron in there. It doesn't have any DNA in it, so it can never replicate. It's just either old coronavirus, which causes common cold. Somebody mentioned to me it might have been adenovirus, which is a DNA virus, but it really wouldn't matter. All we did was have the spike protein stuck to it, so our body would recognize the spike protein and build antibodies toward it. The one good thing about these vaccines and what we have to understand when it says they're effective, they're only talking about being effective of stopping the disease. So if you take this vaccine, some people will not get COVID 19. They'll get the SARS virus in them and they will not have COVID 19. 95% of people won't, but 5% will. But out of all of these, zero have had to go to the hospital, zero have had to go to ICU, and zero have died. So why are we taking this vaccine? We're not taking it not just to have a pneumonia. We're taking it not to die. So right now, these vaccines are 100% effective in not letting you die, and that's pretty great. So you can claim all you want, saying that this is population control or I don't know, Bill Gates doing it to auto chip you. But think about this: when these diseases strike other countries, when we watch it on the news, like Ebola, hitting Africa, or some other flu hitting Europe, we just say, "Oh, that sucks for them." But in America, where we feel entitled, protected, and sheltered, if something happens to us, it's got to be done. We can't. We're not susceptible to Mother Nature. It's got to be a human being that's greater than Mother Nature doing it to us. No, it's just Mother Nature again. Don't be so thinking that we can't be hurt. We can. And because you haven't seen it in your backyard doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I know globalization has really allowed us to see each other really closely and over the internet, but just because you're not seeing mortuaries overflowing in your city doesn't mean that LA's not seeing it. Just because your neighbor hasn't died or your friend's husband hasn't died doesn't mean people aren't dying. Are there some weird things happening? Like I heard a first-hand account the other day that a friend of mine's other friend was shot in the neck and died, and that they said they were trying to put COVID as the cause of death. And this person, I clarified with them, I was like, they were killed immediately, and they said yes. So that seems weird. They would have tried to put COVID for that cause of death. So I'm sure there is some inflated numbers over there, whether it's malicious to get higher ratings, but it's not enough, I don't think, to mean anything. There's a deadly virus out there, and it's killing people. So why really give a shoot, right? So when it comes down to this, even when we get vaccinated, we have to wear masks because we can still spread it. Like I said, this is not a SARS-CoV-2 vaccination. It's a COVID-19 vaccination. It's like the AIDS vaccination. You can still get the virus. You can still shed it to other people. You just won't get the illness. You will not go to the hospital. You can still pass it to other people. I think that's it. I think as more stuff comes out, and when I get back home and have my proper setup, I might get more into this. But just always look at the right sources, and don't get mad that you don't know something. Like, look into it, how you can figure it out. If you want to know how bacteria and viruses replicate and how is it possible that Bill Gates created a virus, learn how they work. It's actually really easy to make viruses. They really assemble very easily, so maybe it's possible. But go take that, 1 day study that it would take probably on YouTube to do, a full day of just looking and understanding basic immunology, and do it. And the more you understand about the body, the more you can kind of understand that those aren't possible. So that's when people like doctors dismiss your claims so easily. It's because we already see all the million connections that don't add up, and just can just say no. It's not that we just don't believe you. It's just we did the work a little bit faster in our heads than you did. Yeah. So, and I know sometimes people sound very paternal about that, or just seem condescending. And sometimes it can when you answer the thing three or four times in a row. So, I think that's it. I don't know what else to talk about. Just another word I guess we could talk about: nauseated versus nauseous.